It is exactly 8:07, and if you're keeping track, you might say, hey, you guys are a minute late. Rest assured, though, we will keep up. We will get ahead of ourselves and get back to the exact time that it should be here on Garden America, which is 8:07, but you don't care about that. This is Garden America. Good morning. Welcome to the weekend, along with yours truly, Brian Main. Tiger Palafox is here. John Bagnasco is back after taking last week off, a short little hiatus. And last week, John, on Facebook, we had a lot of people wishing you quick recovery. And obviously, you did recover quickly. You sound good. You look good. You are tan, rested, and ready.
I don't know about quickly. I recovered, but it wasn't quick.
Seems quick to us.
Really?
Because you weren't here last week, and now you're back, and you look good.
Yeah. It was some type of flu virus.
Right. You know, but you bring up a good point. Somebody's sick today. Automatic assumption is COVID.
Yeah.
And you didn't have COVID.
Except on the Omicron variant, I had all the symptoms. Right. So I even tested twice because I went out and when I was going in public, I wanted to make sure I didn't have it, or I would have stayed home.
Right, but you're good. You were good. You're fine.
Yeah.
All right.
Absolutely.
Good. That was a very lonely, empty chair last week.
Did you even miss me?
Absolutely. Well, 2 hours after the show ended, I said, "Hey, Tiger, was John here today? It was weird. Something was missing." Of course, we missed you. Yeah. And look at all these people climbing aboard the Facebook ship. The Facebook Live vessel is on its way, John.
Last week I planted 15 rose bushes, the start of Polyantha Hill.
Oh, yeah? Oh, so you planted?
Planted in the ground.
Okay, wow.
I only got 3 new ones from heirloom roses.
Wow. And,
but I did plant, I'm planting all my polyanthas in one area. I think it'll look really good.
Did you use cages?
No, one had a cage, but since I had to use a jackhammer to dig the holes, I thought maybe they'll be safe from gophers.
So in the past, the cage that we would sell was that root guard, almost chicken wire looking gopher cage.
Right.
There's a new one, and I'm trying to find it.
The ones you gave me.
Yeah, the ones I gave you. I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about it because the holes on that cage are much smaller.
Yeah, it's more like a real small mesh.
Right. So I'm wondering, could trees still grow through that, or would it choke the roots?
I mean, that's what I agree. Like, it's very, but I mean, they sell it as it's supposed to work, and
yeah, but it would work for maybe perennials or smaller plants,
but not trees or large hedges or something.
I don't know. I don't know if the trees roots grow through that.
I'm trying to find it to see.
Hey, I think the camera's stuck on me, Tiger.
Oh, sorry. I should probably turn that off.
Like a lot of people are.
It's a little uncomfortable now. I'm getting a little hot.
There we go.
There we go. There we go. And now we've got John and Tiger.
Yeah, I'll have to find that because I agree, John. Like that mesh one, I like to use it.
Right.
It's easier to use.
Yeah. And less expensive.
But if your roots are just going to bind up in that cage, not going to be a good one to use down the road.
Or if they started to grow through as they expanded, would they get choked?
Right. Like isn't the whole premise of the cage, they're not supposed to be forever. They're supposed to just get the plants kind of established to the point where it would be really hard for a gopher to kill it.
Well, I think the point of the cage is that the gopher can never eat enough of the roots to kill the
whole plant, right?
Because I've had rose bushes where it looked like it was a beaver, not a gopher. Because not only do they eat the roots, they gnaw the stems.
Yep.
Everything, huh?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, that whole thing goes down.
Look at this. Good morning from San Jose. Glad you're back, John. See?
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you, Tanya.
People did. You got the name
do
right
like
too.
you, John.
John said her name right, Tanya, not Tanya.
There you go.
That's from a few weeks ago.
That's why she likes him.
So welcome to those that are tuned in on Biz Talk Radio. This is last week's show. For those on Facebook Live, it is this week's show. We are live. Anything we say and do, I guess we could take responsibility for, John, because I don't have a dump button here. So we're live on Facebook. If we say it, it's going to go out over the air, and then we'll have to deal with the Facebook police.
Diane says that she just got an ebb tide tree rose.
Okay.
And she wants to know my thoughts about it. It's a nice rose. It's one from Weeks.
Yeah.
And it's a nice purple color. the past president of the American Rose Society, Bob Martin, that just passed away, always used to kid about some of Tom Caruth, who was the breeder at Weeks, about some of his roses, because he had a lot of lavender roses, and like maybe 20.
Any reason?
Well, I don't know, but Bob would always joke when somebody would ask about a particular rose. He goes, "Oh yeah, that's another Tom Caruth from his blue period."
That's good. That's real
That
good.
is, I'm sure rose breeders do have periods. I mean, you've talked about peeing every once in a while when he gets hung up on something,
Right.
and just goes off on trying to breed that one thing.
Well, Bob Martin did the same thing because he was crossing Julia Child with Anne Morrow Lindbergh, and he kept doing the same cross over and over again.
We're talking about roses, people, just in case you're
Yeah,
joining
yeah,
the show
right.
Yeah.
late.
And to me, it was kind of funny because I knew the real reason he was using that cross. He kept telling me about the merits of both roses. But the real reason was because I've done Anne Morrow Lindbergh crosses, and the seed germinate, where other roses are very difficult to germinate.
Okay.
But that particular one, you can plant them. You don't even have to put them in the refrigerator, and they germinate.
Okay.
So I think that was the main reason he was doing it.
He was just trying to get some crazy seed that might come out of it.
I think he was just trying to get something to come up.
Yeah. Oh, that's funny.
It's hard to produce a rose if it won't germinate.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Hey, so those that tune into the show live, obviously, if you're back east, it's 11:06, much later here in San Diego on the West Coast from the iHeart Studios. It is 8:06. Today we were, like I said, a minute late, but you know what? We're going to make up for it, just like John does every year when he saves his hour for daylight savings time. We're going to do the same thing for this hour. Hey, today's guest, we're going to be talking about Australian natives.
Yeah, we're going to be talking about Australian native plants with a Australian native plant grower, Joe O'Connell, should be
And
joining us from
Australian native plant person.
Yeah,
Exactly.
Australian native person.
Yeah.
Joe O'Connell joining us from Central Coast of California to talk about what plant selection there are, how to take care of them, and firsthand knowledge from somebody who's lived through a forest fire. Should be telling us about plants that can help slow the spread of fire or protect your property.
Now, I'm surprised, and maybe I missed one of these comments, surprised no one has asked what this tree is in front of me here that John brought in,
I
which
should zoom out
immediately
on it,
I
yeah.
said, I like that. What is it? I still like it. John, what is it?
Well, I brought it in because we're talking to Joe about Australian plants, and this is a bottle tree from Australia, Brachiocaitane Rupestrus. So,
And then,
And
but
there
next
was-
to it, tell them about my pelargonium
Oh, yeah, exactly.
down there. That's the one you gave me. It's in bloom now.
right, yeah, and it's kind of different. I like the leaves on it
Yes.
because they look nice by themselves, but then
Fuzzy, ferny looking.
But then the really bright orangey red flowers come out on it in contrast to the leaves, and it looks good. It's one of the pelargonium species from South Africa.
Yeah.
And those are winter growers. So this time of year they come out and
They're
bloom
looking
like
great.
crazy. Yeah.
Yeah,
And then
that's
they
awesome.
go semi-dormant during the summer.
How big will that tree get?
Well, did you look at the newsletter?
I did. I perused it, John.
There was
That wasn't my question.
That was an excellent lead in because then he can say, now if you knew.
Exactly. See, exactly.
Well, there was a picture of a mature
Right.
one. That's why
Right, but
I
I don't-
asked if you looked. And the neat thing about the bottle trees that I didn't even know until I wrote that little blurb for the newsletter is that mature trees in Australia can be dug up and they're moved anywhere in Australia and sometimes to different parts of the world. And they don't even have to be planted for 2 or 3 months after they've been dug up, and they do just fine.
What do you attribute that to? The Australian climate, the soil, what?
No, the bottle tree
need-
itself
need to
holds so
survive.
much water that they're very easy to move.
Yeah.
What's the first thing I said to you? I said, looks like it's root bound and needs water. John said, did you read the newsletter? So that's exactly the point. It looks good. I like that.
I like the quote of the
It's
week though,
different.
too.
Do you want it?
Yeah,
From
that?
yeah.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, you can.
Did
Well-
you
you-
see the picture of the tree in the newsletter and then envision your patio?
But
Well,
you know
let me
what?
tell-
They do use them as house plants and even bonsais.
I could put that in the house.
Because if you keep the pot,
You could.
right, they stop it, they restrict it.
Right.
Well, that's what I was going to say. So I could just if I left it in this pot, that's about as big as it's going to get, roughly.
No, I would put it in a little bigger pot because
Okay.
you can see the roots coming out the bottom
Yeah,
of that
I've got
one.
plenty of soil at home. Absolutely. Hey, we got to take a break here.
And
We're
I'm
gonna-
sure Dana's thinking, and we have plenty of room.
No, I can make this work. Absolutely. Hey, we're up against the clock here, so when we return from the break on BizTalk Radio Facebook Live, we're going to bring Joe on, Australian natives. Going to take care of business with our sponsors on BizTalk Radio. Do stay with us. Thank you for tuning in, those live on Facebook and those listening on BizTalk Radio. This is Garden America, back after these messages on BizTalk Radio. Okay, we are back, and we thank you for tuning in this morning. This is Garden America. If you're just joining us, or maybe you're brand new, never seen or heard the show before, we welcome you. I'm Brian Main, Tiger Palafox, John Begnasco. The whole crew is here. We've got John's quote of the week, and then we're going to bring our guest on, so stand by. And again, if you have any questions, comments, be sure to post them right there on our Facebook page. John?
Quote of the week, right?
This is it. Quote of this week. Not last week, but this week.
Well, in honor of our guest, I found a quote that somehow referred to, or some way referred to Australia, and it was from your buddy Charles Schultz.
Oh, yeah, from Santa Rosa, California.
Is that where he was from?
Yep. Yes,
Really?
sir. Mm-hmm.
Next door to Luther Burbank.
Maybe.
Anyway, he said, "Don't worry about the world coming to an end today. It's already tomorrow in Australia."
There you go. So it's not going to happen today necessarily because of the tomorrow.
It would have been in Australia already.
It's that whole international dateline thing that I deal with. Okay, Tiger, in honor of the tree that John brought in, let's bring our guest on.
Yeah, so this morning we have joining us from Ventura, California, Joe O'Connell from AustralianPlants.com, a Australian plant nursery located up there on the Central Coast. Good morning, Joe.
Oh, good morning, guys.
Thank you very much for joining us this morning. How's the weather up by you right now?
It's a bit overcast, but the sun's peeking through the clouds.
Oh, all right. Ventura is a wonderful
Nice area. Yeah.
You know, to just you guys have the best of both worlds. You get a nice chill in the winter. It's a great place in the summertime, and yeah, lots of good stuff. Joe, you guys have a Australian, obviously native plant nursery there. You're from Australia, and you guys specialize not just in the Australian natives, but the arid plants. You've had so much experience growing them. But how long have you been here in the U.S. with the nursery?
Well, I've been here for about 30 years now. I came over in the late 90s to establish the Taft Gardens Australian garden up there in Ojai, and I've more or less been here ever since. I spent a couple of years back in Australia, in outback Australia, and then I married an American, and he said, "Here's a property, do whatever you want." So I started the nursery.
Ah. Now it's something funny. Just this morning I was cruising online, and I'm a big traveler, Joe. So things come up on my feed, and it was this really neat map of the United States, and it was this kind of crafty thing where it was a map of the United States, and you were supposed to put pictures that you had taken with your family or yourself and they were, when you visited that state, you were supposed to put that picture in that state shape in this map, right? And they had one of Australia. So in the United States, there's obviously 50 different pictures you can put.
Right.
Well, the one for Australia, it had 5. They had 5. They had like a northern East Coast, a northern West Coast. There was a big section in the middle, and then there was like a northern or in southern, East and West Coast. Yeah. So they didn't break it up as much. You guys have large gaps in between your regions there in Australia, right?
Oh, yes, we do. We do. We have the East Coast is often more humid, and they can expect rain any time of the year. So, plants from Western Australia, the southwest corner, and South Australia, which is more Mediterranean, where they only get winter rains. In Eastern Australia, you can get rain any time of the year. And talking about plants, most plants that don't mind these extended dry periods are plants that come from more of the East Coast and inland Australia, I've found, than the true Mediterranean plants in southwestern Australia, where they expect to get a good 40 inches of rain every year. And if they don't get it, if they don't get the winter rains, they really pout.
Yeah.
So I feel like I can grow plants from all areas of Australia, and they do really well here.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question. Is what area of Australia does the central coast of California align with most?
Well, it aligns with the Mediterranean climate, which is the southwest area, south of Perth, and also around Adelaide in South Australia.
Yeah.
So there's the Great Australian Bight in between Perth and Adelaide, and so plants have that Adelaide area has a Mediterranean climate, and parts of Victoria as well. But otherwise, the rest of the say 250 miles from the coast of, say, thinking of Sydney inland, that is temperate to subtropical, and then you get up to Queensland where you get tropical, and then in the middle is desert, and sometimes you have up the top you have dry tropics. So plants from all those environments, and I've lived in all those areas in Australia. I can take plants from all those areas, and they do well in Southern California.
And now, you're talking about all these regions in Australia. So can people, I mean, if you're living in the southern part of the United States, can most of those areas have some kind of Australian native plant, where maybe the northern states, that's where maybe you draw the line and you cannot grow an Australian native?
Yeah, in the ground.
Yeah.
In the ground. Yeah, draw the line. But, like Arizona, across to Texas, Florida. I even have people in Louisiana, in the Carolinas. There's some Australian plants that can grow in those environments. And, I've even had a lot of Australians contact me that are all over the US and saying, we want our Australian plants. So I go, okay. So they make me think what they can try, and usually we come up with something for them.
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, John, I don't know if you were watching or listening earlier, but John brought in a bottle tree into the studio and for our Facebook Live so people can see it. Which variety was it again, John?
That was Brachiocaitane Rupestrus.
Yeah, and I'm sure. I mean, I've seen that tree. Out. We live, Balboa Park. We have the zoo here, so I get to see these with the wild animal park. I get to see these trees actually be planted and how they grow, and they're just so neat looking. That I'm sure if you're native to an area where it's from, that would be a neat tree to have in your yard, right? Bring a little bit of home with you if you're from Australia to see it there, right?
And I think that's one that does well as a house plant also, doesn't it?
Yep, it does. It'll live for years and years and years in a container, and there's other species of Brachiocaitane that will do that as well.
So, hey, Joe, we're going to have to take a break here in about 1 minute. But when we get back from break, I want to hit on the idea of, is planting an Australian native similar to planting a California native? Kind of same general rules, kind of see what you think about what people need to do to be prepared for that. So we're going to take a break, and when we get back, we'll continue talking with Joe O'Connell with AustralianPlants.com.
Absolutely. And again, those on Facebook Live, any questions, comments for one of us or our guest, Joe O'Connell, then be sure to post it right there on Facebook, talking about Australian natives with Joe O'Connell. Okay, that said, for our Biz Talk Radio audience, you can always tune in, listen to our show live on Facebook, 8:06 West Coast, Eastern Time Zone, 11:06. Going to take a break with segment number 3 coming up next here on Garden America. Do stay with us. Back after these messages on Biz Talk Radio. Okay, just like that, those on Facebook Live, we have returned from that very short break. Those on Biz Talk Radio, we welcome you back, and hopefully wherever you are, your market carries both hours, hour 1 or 2, or at least one or the other, hours 1 or 2. As we continue, as I said back from the break, our guest this morning is Joe O'Connell here, as we continue, Tiger, with a lot of great information, especially when it comes to the climates and the various areas of Australia, and what plants, as we mentioned before, will do well in this country.
Yeah, Joan, before the break, I had asked you what you kind of thought people needed to know. Are planting Australian native plants similar to planting a California native, maybe planting an Arizona native? You said these plants can cross the borders into the southern parts of the United States. What are some things that people need to realize about what might be different for an Australian native plant?
Well, the main thing is the fact that the soils in Australia are very low in nutrients, and so the plants have evolved with root systems and requirements that don't like particular minerals, and so the soils mostly are also more acidic than the alkaline soils that we have here in Southern California. So phosphorus is the main issue planting Australian natives. It's not all Australian natives, but it's plants that are in the mostly Fabaceae family, which is all the pea family, and the Protea family, which is the Banksias and the Grevilleas. So no added phosphorus at planting. Okay. I suggest people just dig a hole, fill it with water if the hole's dry, and plant the plant, and then mulch it, and the plant's root systems can take the nutrients they need out of the mulch layer. Some Australian plants have what is known as proteoid root systems, and these are fine root systems that are very good at extracting nutrients out of the soil. So if phosphorus is there, it'll grab that phosphorus, and that can be toxic to them. But apart from that, they grow really well with California natives and South African natives. So they complement each other.
And the other thing I found was, because they do, have these style of root systems, what do you think about a drip system versus just kind of maybe like an overhead watering? I found that sometimes people will put the drip too close to the base of the plant, and that does affect some of the Australian natives more severely than if they were. It's okay to use a drip, but just don't put it right at the base of the plant. What are your thoughts, Joe?
Oh, I totally agree with that. Yes, but if you've got a little basin and you put your dripper further out on the edge of the basin, then the base can fill, and then the water can soak down, and it catches all around the plant and not just right on top of it, where insects can get in and they can be detrimental to your plant, to the health of your plant. And I also want to say, given the water issues that we have in Southern California, that deep infrequent watering really is the way to establish a drought-hardy or a drier-hardy plant. And most of these Australian plants can handle that.
It sounds like a very low maintenance, well, at least this one here, this bottle tree, low maintenance. Yeah. And most most plants from Australia because they're used to having almost nothing in the soil. Is that right, Joe, that you talked about in terms of them being used to the poor soil conditions?
Yep. They're used to poor soil conditions. They're used to extended dry periods, which is good. But I think what is really important to know is that if you're watering your plants, you need to be watering them more like once a month than 3 times for 10 minutes a week. That's just producing a very weak, shallow root system, and you need to get those roots down nice and deep. So if there's any moisture down there, they can find it down deep.
Excellent. And so, all right, what are some plants that people should look for? Can you give us some names of some varieties, Joe?
For any particular...
Well, I think I think a lot of people are looking usually for some privacy or some hedging, and maybe they want something not just a normal privet or podocarpus or something like that. Is there anything that is in your guys' plant palette that serves the same purpose?
Well, there's a multitude of plants, and in fact, that's one of the main aspects that people come to the nursery for, because screens and blocking. I should say that a lot of these Australian plants get big, so you have to know what dimensions you want them to be if you want lower maintenance. So it's about picking the right plant for the right situation. So, for instance, if you had a narrow area, you could do plants like Callistemon slim or a Hakea. These are plants that will get 9 foot plus. So Hakea elliptica is beautiful chartreuse green foliage with a tan new growth and white flower. Or Hakea Brachioides, which is another deep green foliage with red tips and orange-red flowers. I might say that 98% of my plants are pollinated by birds, bees, and insects. So they all have flowers that are going to attract the birds as well. If you want fatter shrubs, I've got plenty of big fat shrubs. If you've got deep shade and you want to try and screen, I have plants like a tree violet, which gets to about 12 foot, and that is a very, very tough, resilient plant. Do you want me to keep going?
Yeah, please. And because you had just mentioned the shade, right?
Yeah.
And one of the things we kept talking about Australia, dry, arid. We talk about all these plants, but there's still shady areas in Australia, and there's some really neat plants that actually do well and bloom, because people are always looking for plants that bloom in the shade. And, there's a good list of those too, correct?
Oh, yes, there is. Like, even if you imagine Australia covered in eucalypt trees, which is not everywhere, but even that lets a lot of light in. So a lot of plants are very adaptive to shade. Deep shade, there's plants like correas, and they're around a lot of nurseries, and they're very tough to the heat, the cold, the sun, the shade. They're very resilient plants. And then there's different grasses. We have Dianellas that there's so many new Dianella cultivars out now that have nice deep green leaves or variegated leaves or grey leaves, and then they get these blue and yellow flowers with a beautiful bright blue berry. Or Lamandra, which can be anything from a 18-inch plant up to about 5 foot. So they're good for being a screen. They have scented flowers that are lovely, and they're also fire resistant. So, Eremophilus, which are emu bush, they come from inland Australia or coastal Australia. So there's plants for every description.
Hey, we do have some questions, John. I'm starting back up with Carla, I guess, John.
Well, I was going to mention Millie's question because Joe had just mentioned Eremophila, and she says she has a variety called bluebills emu bush in the ground. And she said it's been about 2 years since she planted it, but it doesn't seem to be thriving. Any ideas about how she should care for it? She's in north of Santa Barbara.
One called bluebells.
Yes.
Okay, so I have to figure out what that is, but has she tried...
She said Aeromophila hygrophana.
Oh, hygrophana.
Yeah.
Yeah. And she's had it for 10 years and it's
No,
not flowering?
2 years, she said,
2 years.
and it's not thriving.
Well, hard to know, but has she watered it or has she not watered? Has she overwatered it? If she's watered it, it won't like that. Is it in full sun? It should be in full sun to really thrive.
And then is that another one where you want to stay away from phosphorus fertilizers?
I would say yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, we got to jump in, take a break. We're on a good roll here, so we're going to continue with these questions. We have a few more on Facebook Live, so do stay with us. Joe, thank you for your patience. We've got to take a break for our listeners on Biz Talk Radio. On Facebook Live, we'll come back much, much sooner. So that said, again, quick break. Back with Joe. A lot of questions on Facebook, so keep them coming. Tiger Palafox, John Bagnesco, I'm Brian Main. Got to take a break for Biz Talk Radio and back after these messages. All righty, we are back from that short Facebook Live break, a bit longer on Biz Talk Radio. Those on Biz Talk Radio, this is the final segment of hour number 1. You've got news coming up top of the hour, and hopefully you're back with us for hour number 2 at 6 minutes after. In the meantime, we are back with Joe and answering your questions about Australian natives. John?
John.
Tiger?
Well, I was gonna say, John, can you help us out, because my chat keeps fading in and out. The only question I see right now on mine is from Rochelle, and it's a comment that she bought 4 Melaleucas from Joe about 15 years ago, and they've grown to provide a beautiful windbreak that is 10 feet tall and 40 feet long. Melaleucas are one of those really cool looking plants or shrubs too. I mean, the shape that they get, the color of the flower as well. So, definitely, know that Melaleuca is a great shrub tree as well that is an Australian native.
As long as you're not in Florida.
Yeah.
Yes.
Carla is in Huntington Beach, Joe, and she said you mentioned Protea, and she loves them, but didn't succeed with the one that she bought, and she wonders, can she keep it in a pot, or should it go in the ground? And it depends on the type of Protea, I guess, because the Proteaceae family has so many different types that some might be suitable for pot culture and maybe some aren't.
Yeah, that's true. If she's talking about true Proteas from South Africa, well, they can live for many years in a pot, in a container, in a big one, because they get big. And then if she wants to plant it in the ground, we'll just be aware that the root system's going to be quite impacted rather than a younger plant going straight into the ground, being planted directly in the ground. So a true Protea from South Africa, expect them to get 8 by 8, just for instance, assuming you would prune it each year and cut the flowers off. So that's a fairly big shrub. And then, Banksias, they're the Australian equivalent, shall we say. They can get quite big, but we have ground covers, we have medium shrubs, large shrubs, and trees of different Banksias. And so the ground covers, for instance, Banksia blechnifolia, makes a beautiful container shrub, or, low container garden plant. And
Yeah, I think most people, when they think of Protea, though, they want that florist, floral
Oh, the
arrangement.
King Protea.
Protea, and
Yeah,
you know, like what
yeah.
you're saying, the Banksia is a beautiful shrub, you know, but it's not that same flower. And that's
It's also a pretty large bush before you get the flower.
yeah, that's the hard thing, you know. And so, you know, that one Protea that Spuler's so accustomed to seeing in a florist arrangement, you know, that's the one that we're talking about. It's a little bit more difficult to grow in a pot, or, you know, even in Newport Beach, right? Like they really,
But I've noticed that the leucospermums do really well.
they do.
In
They
the
do.
ground
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
Most people, when they're referring to proteas, seem to be meaning the pincushions,
Yes.
the leucospermums.
Yeah.
And, I mean, I grow them in tubs up to 15 gallons, and they do well. But, you know, if they're in a pot like that for 4, 5, 6 years, well, they start to get a bit old, and, you know, it's harder to water them and for them to thrive. So they really are better grown in the ground.
Hey, I want to switch subjects because I want to make sure we hit on this. You know, from someone who's had some first-hand knowledge on what forest fires can do, Australian natives are also, or Australia is also one of those regions that is prone to forest fires. So similar to California, Australians have the same, you know, worry of forest fires. So are their plants going to react similar as California natives?
Yeah, certainly. If it's a regular fire, if I can say that, given our extreme fires we've had, but if it's a regular fire that comes through and burns through quite fast, well, most Australian plants can handle that, and they have ways of regenerating. So they might have a lignituber, and a lot of California natives have that as well, which are underground dormant buds. So once the fire's passed, and usually there's rain follows, if you're lucky, and then they can reshoot from that lignituber.
Oh.
Another way is for them to drop seeds, and seeds can be in the soil, and the fire can trigger that for them to regenerate as well from seed. And, you know, some from the trunk, some can start growing out from the trunks and the branches. And having the fire go through my property, and, you know, I had plants like Banksia integrifolia. It just came back better than ever, and more floriferous than ever. And I had a Hymenantha dentata, which is a tree violet, and it just came straight back. Acacia bruceri, which was the first plant to come back, it came back well. Lamandras can hold embers before they ignite for 40 minutes.
Oh, wow.
So this time round, I've got lamandras planted all around my house.
Okay. Yeah. So you're actually using them as a little bit of a fire break then, to kind of give you some buffer.
Yes,
Okay.
and just a few comments about the fire. If you're thinking of planting with that in mind, then plants with smooth bark, they will help reduce a fire igniting rather than a tree or a shrub that has a flaky bark.
Mm-hmm.
Plants that have high moisture or salt content in their leaves, they're slower to burn. If you have a hedge, if you know which direction a fire would be coming from, if you have a hedge, plant a hedge with those conditions in it, and just keep it well watered, especially when you know the fire's coming. If you can really soak it, and then that can slow down the fire.
All right. Hey, Joe, we are going to have to take another break. Sorry to interrupt, but when we get back, we'll finish talking with Joe O'Connell from AustralianPlants.com, and we'll take a break and come back ASAP.
Yeah, that is exactly right. Those on Biz Talk Radio, that is the end of hour number 1. Hour 2, just around the corner after news coming up top of the hour. If your local market does carry our show, 6 minutes after, we'll kick off hour number 2. Our guest this morning, as we talk about Australian natives, is Joe O'Connell. So again, quick break on Facebook Live, a bit longer on Biz Talk Radio. Stay with us. All righty, we weren't gone too long. Welcome back, those on Biz Talk Radio. 6 minutes after, as far as you're concerned, here on Facebook Live, we don't care about time. We keep on rolling along. So thank you for joining us. If you've been with us, you know that we're discussing Australian natives this morning with Joe O'Connell. Great guest, a lot of good information. Keep those questions and comments coming. Those watching live on Facebook, Tiger.
Yeah, and before the break, Joe, you were telling us some firsthand knowledge about forest fires coming through, what plants are affected, how they're affected, and one of the things I kind of thought about when you were talking about these plants, and I was looking at a lot of these Australian natives in my mind, in their foliage, their shape, and the way that they look, and I think people need to realize that it almost seems like these plants, as you mentioned, they kind of let embers go through the plant a little bit more than maybe some of our non-native shrubs that are so dense that actually probably catch embers, which then would ignite them and then cause more problems. So it's kind of almost like a evolution of a plant to be able to think like, oh, look at these plants aren't just catching fire all the time because they have their own defense mechanisms.
Yeah. That's true. And, and a lot of them have fleshy leaves too.
Mm-hmm.
It's the fleshy leaves that really can slow down that fire.
Yeah.
Hey, speaking of leaves, I have a question that I don't know the answer to.
All right.
That's why it's a question.
That's why it's a question, yes. It's not just a question to show off how much I know. I've noticed that a lot of Australian natives plants have immature leaves when they're younger, and then they change shape. I know a lot of the eucalyptus do, the Brachiocaitane do, Stenocarpus does. Do you have any idea why that is?
I've never really.
She
never
has the
really
question now
questioned it.
too,
I've just-
John.
She
No,
never
no,
thought
no.
about that, John.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there's plants all over the world that do that, I guess, but it just seemed to me that there were a significant number of Australian plants that do that.
Eucalyptus especially, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, their mature foliage is much different than their
Yeah.
younger, plant foliage for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, if you ever find out, let me know.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll have to look. I'll have to look into it now.
So, Joe,
Yeah.
tell us a little bit about what's happening at the nursery right now. Are you guys open and selling plants?
Yes, I'm open. I'm selling plants. I've in October 2019, there was an awful frost that came through, and it was unexpected, and so that really set me back. And then but since then, I've really been putting a lot of effort into propagation and growing. So I've got a pretty full nursery right now. Also, with the fire, I didn't have a heated cutting bench, so that slowed down my propagation with doing cuttings. That's all back. I've got a house back. I've got an office back. I'm open to the public, but only by appointment, and that's Monday to Friday. And I've got lots of plants ready to go into gardens.
Now, if people order plants, what size do you ship?
We ship mostly 1 gallons. This is mail order. Mostly 1 gallons, and sometimes they might be 4-inch or 5-inch pots. I really want to ship the 4 or 5-inch because it's so expensive these
Right.
days shipping, especially to over the mountains. But a lot of the time they're 1 gallon plants.
Lila in Poway has a question that she hasn't been able to grow Geraldton wax flowers and wonders if you have any ideas on how to keep them alive.
Sandy soils. They definitely have to have well-drained soils. The sandier, the better. Full sun. They're the 2 main criteria for Geraldton wax.
And
then, yeah.
no overwatering, I would assume.
No overwatering, but you've got to establish, and it takes 2 years, in Southern California, it takes 2 years to get a plant established. You need to water it regularly until you see it take in the soil and start getting its roots out of that pot that it's been grown in. and then you start backing off on your watering. So water it deeper every 2 weeks, not, like I said before, not 3 times a week, shallow watering. So then you really, and if you've got sandy soil, you have to really make sure that water gets down and the roots can get access. It doesn't just drain away from the plant. So mulching is really going to help that as well.
And I will say, Joe, you have one of my favorite old new plants on your mail order program, and that's the Atananthus, the woolly bushes. Those I love those plants right now. I can't get enough. I can't wait. I think they're becoming more and more popular. They're going to have new varieties because they're pretty neat plants.
There's a few, yeah.
So.
And they're great right on the front line of the ocean.
Oh, good. Good to know.
Especially Atananthus serraceus. That will grow frontline ocean front.
Awesome. Good to know. Well, great info. Thank you very much for joining us this morning, Joe. Good luck with everything. Keep us in touch with how things are going at the nursery, and maybe we'll talk to you again in the fall.
Okay. Thank you, Tiger.
Take care.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Joe. And again, that did evoke a lot of questions, comments on our Facebook page. So, people interested. And again, especially dealing with these kinds of plants from Australia, of course people have questions because you don't treat these like you would maybe some natives here.
Yeah, and, it's kind of neat to be able to take plants from other regions of the world and still do well in the region you live in, but a completely different look. I mean, we have our California natives, and they have native plants in Texas and, Utah and all kinds of places. But those Australian native plants are very unique, very
absolutely
very different looking.
To be fire retardant, for one thing, to not need a whole lot of care, a whole lot of water. I mean,
almost hurt to the point where you'll hurt it if you.
Well, that's just it. It's against everything we've been taught as gardeners.
Yeah.
As far as the care for it. So I think she was really good in terms of enlightening us on if you do have Australian natives and how to care for them. And John, we're sorry that she couldn't answer your question, but I do know what you're talking about.
That is an interesting
observation. Yes, it is.
Because you think, like, why does something come out and look different than when it's older? Evolution has some reason why, as far as why it didn't just have the same foliage.
Well, John,
from day
take a look
one.
at John's baby picture compared to now.
Exactly.
And I might ask the same question.
Exactly.
Or any one of us, right?
Yeah.
So again, so here's an example right here. This bottle tree, John, Tiger. So you water it, you maybe fertilize it, and then what? Once a month, water. How would you care for that?
I wouldn't fertilize it.
Do
at
nothing.
all.
Yeah, no fertilizer.
Just transplant it and a little water.
Now I did fertilize those because I grew those from seed, right?
Wow.
So they're 2 years old now, and I did put a little Osmocote in there.
But you're saying right now, just give it a bigger pot, let it go?
A bigger pot with some good potting soil, and I think it'll be fine.
And a once-a-month watering, would you say?
No, not to start out with.
No, but
not
I mean,
in a container. In a container, I would say maybe I've been watering that container, which you can see doesn't hold much water at all, about once a week.
Oh, so water once a week once established?
Yeah.
Or once I transplant it?
Once you transplant it.
Once
yeah.
a week. Okay.
Well, during the winter, maybe once every 2 weeks.
Right.
I made a big move yesterday. I was doing some yard work in the afternoon, and I've had my water turned off on my whole yard.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
For, what am I going on, 2, maybe almost 3 months now.
Wow.
And I turned it back on yesterday. And it really doesn't need it, but the lawn is starting to look a little shabby.
Right.
And so I'm like, I'm just going to turn it on because I don't see any rain in the forecast. The temperatures are, medium, and it's not even overcast. We just have sunny days right now. And so
pretty nice. Last couple of days.
I'm going to turn my water back on. So I've turned on my irrigation system. And one thing I was going to ask Joe, but I didn't even know if she would know this answer, John. And I don't know if you noticed, the plants from Australia, do you think that they get affected by any of our pests more? Because I know, for instance, like the eucalyptus, they get that lerp, and but it doesn't really kill the tree or anything. It's just not very good. But I wonder if they're more prone to any of our pests because they're maybe
Well,
from Australia.
eucalyptus aren't prone to any of our pests.
Okay.
All the pests from
That are on a eucalyptus?
come from Australia.
Oh, okay.
It used to be during the eucalyptus craze in California when everybody was planting eucalyptus trees, there was not a single leaf that was eaten by an insect. And the reason was all the trees were grown from seed. So there were no insects in the United States that attacked eucalyptus. And so they looked fine. But then, with air travel and things, eventually
Those bugs
they
got
started coming.
We got to take a break, guys, real quick, and we're going to come back.
All right.
So do stay with us. Again, open for questions, comments right there on Facebook, whatever's on your mind as we continue through our winter months here in just about everywhere, I guess. I know snow in some areas, a little warmer in other areas, but it's still wintertime. So that said, we're going to take a quick break after these messages on Biz Talk Radio. We'll be right back. And, of course, Facebook Live here on Garden America. All right. Thank you for being there. Thank you for making Garden America us part of your weekend. We do appreciate it as we kick things off every Saturday morning, 6 minutes after the hour. That's 8:06 West Coast, 11:06 Eastern Time Zone. We are back, ready for your questions, your comments. And, John, want to finish up on
Well,
your
yeah,
thoughts?
we were just talking about how now that the pests from eucalyptus are in the United States, they do attack our eucalyptus trees. But the reason they've been so devastating here, if you go to Australia, every single eucalyptus has got holes in the leaves and things.
Yeah.
Not to mention the koala bears chewing on it. But here, when the pests came, they also came without their natural predators. So they had, millions of eucalyptus trees with nothing to stop them from feasting.
Mm-hmm.
So that was it.
That's what made them more rampant. But I don't notice the problems on grevillea or some of those other plants very
So
often.
far, not.
Yeah.
No. Yeah, and the grevillea are all blooming right now.
Yeah.
They're really starting to look good. We did have some bad news that we didn't mention at the
it
beginning
is sad
of
news,
the hour.
yeah,
It's if you've listened to the show for the last 30 years,
I would say 30 years.
yeah,
Yeah.
The first 10 years of the show was Bruce Asakawa, mostly by himself,
And
right?
then I became his producer back in 1998.
Right.
It was just him and I.
And then Sharon joined the show, and I joined the show.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, Bruce passed away last Thursday.
Right. This past Thursday.
He had been in the VA hospital for the last almost 10 years.
Almost 10 years. He was you called him stubborn, John, and he certainly was right up to the very
Well,
end.
what was the word he always used about certain plants? Tenacious.
Tenacious.
I mean,
and he
that was Bruce.
Tenacious, absolutely. Yeah. So thoughts and prayers go out to his family, Sharon, and their kids.
Yeah.
So it's like we've lost a part of that chain link in Garden America.
Right. And I don't think I've ever met a man in my life that was more gracious than Bruce.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean,
right?
he was a gentleman in every sense of the word.
Right.
And don't feel sorry for him now, but I do feel sorry for everybody around him. That
Sure, absolutely. He's the reason why this show's on the air.
Yeah.
This show has morphed into many different kinds of shows over the years, and this is why we're here.
And what a big impact on our community of horticulturalists.
Oh yeah.
For San Diego for sure, and other parts, because if you go anywhere in this community and you mention that name, people know who Bruce was.
Oh, absolutely. Sure. Even people that I've come across, for some reason, maybe the conversation turns to gardening, and if his name comes up, I've heard of him.
Yeah,
I've heard of Bruce. Now he had a brother. What was his brother's name?
It's two brothers, I think.
because it's interesting because a long time ago, back in the 80s when I was working for a different radio station, I was at Nurseryland, the one off Marina Boulevard at the very end.
Right.
And it was, I don't know if it was a fashion show or what it was. I was involved, and it was with an Asakawa.
Oh.
And all these years later, I thought it was Bruce. And I told Bruce, years later, yeah, you and I did this fashion show, gardening thing kind of. He goes, no, it was my brother.
Yeah.
He knew exactly what I was talking about, but in his fashion, like, no, it was my brother.
Did Bruce ever work for Nurseryland?
No.
No, he just had his own.
Yeah, they had
nursery.
Presidio Garden
Nursery.
Center.
Presidio
Right.
Garden, yeah. But yeah. So, but definitely involved with Nurseryland. Yep.
Yeah, and he told me, it's so funny because when I first came on board, I've always loved plants, and way before I knew as much as I do now, I would just buy plants and not even know what they were, plant them in the ground. And I was always successful, and I was kind of bragging to Bruce, hey, I'm pretty good. I'm pretty good at this. And this is after a few years of working with him. He says, yeah, but now that you know a little bit, you're dangerous.
Yeah.
Now you know a little too much, and now you might screw things up.
Exactly.
And I understood that. I understood what he was saying. Don't get cocky. So yeah, that is our sad news. But what an impact he's had.
He never got flustered either. Did you notice that?
No,
Just-
never. I've got a great memory with Bruce. When was it? This was probably 11, 12 years ago. We went to Chico for a remote.
Mm-hmm.
And this was at the end of basketball season. It was in March. And the Aztecs were in the NCAA tournament. And so they were playing a game. And if they won this game, they would advance to the Sweet 16.
Oh, wow.
So we were having lunch or taking a break. I'm in the car. It's just Bruce and I in the car. And we're listening to the game. And it was at the end of the game when they counted down. And the Aztecs won. And they were going to go to the Sweet 16. And Bruce and I looked at each other and just high-fived each other. It was just a moment,
Yeah.
It wasn't planned. And
Yeah.
he was like, yeah. And I'm like, well, that's a lot of excitement coming out of Bruce. But, that was a moment that I'm going to remember, too, as well, when we were up in Chico with Bruce.
I remember a story you told me when he was on the air to show how unflappable he was, that he was talking to someone from Northern California, and there had been a unusually cold weather up there. Yeah. And Bruce, if you called, no matter what part of the state you called from, he knew where you lived, what the soil was like.
Right, how far away from the river you were.
Yeah. And anyway, so Bruce asked him when the guy called, he says, I've heard you've had some cold weather up there. Is it cold? And the guy's answer, not meaning to say anything bad, said, oh, Bruce, it's so effing cold up here.
It's so effing cold, but he said the word over the air.
Said the word, and you couldn't cut it.
No, and Bruce just said, yeah, I understand it's cold up there. he
just kept going on.
Just kept going on, like it's nobody's business.
Oh, that's
so. And the more we talk about Bruce, the more memories come up as well.
Yeah.
And he was in, even last several years, before he got real sick, he was even in this studio right here. We did shows together.
Yeah, and so John is going to create a link in the newsletter maybe, and so if you do want to send us any messages that you maybe want us to pass to Sharon or the family,
right?
We'll create a link for
and that'll be
people
next
to be
week's
able to
newsletter.
send to. Yeah, exactly. So if you're looking to send any well wishes, you can pass them to us, and then we'll get them off to
Yes,
them.
absolutely. Just so that Sharon's not inundated with, because obviously as popular as Bruce was, this even ventures outside of the gardening community as well. Yeah. So that's it. So again, we're going to continue forward this morning.
Yeah.
With our garden talk.
Yeah, lots of interesting things happening this time of year. One of the things, and we were talking about maybe doing some podcasts here, and I was going to mention the big Sur Fires. We're talking about our communities evolving. We were just talking to Joe about fires, and Big Sur, for people that live in California and along the Central Coast, are such a region that's so known for their plant life and the
it's such
trees,
an iconic area of California.
the vistas that they have, and just to see that one shot that they have of the bridge, that iconic bridge in Big Sur, and then the hillsides behind it just fully engulfed in
Ocean to
flames.
your left, hillsides to your right.
Yeah, it's so sad to see, and it's so sad for me because I was up there this past summer, and we were in an area that had been washed out by a mudslide. There had been they had fires, and then because of the no foliage, they had rain, and then there was a mudslide. And I'm like looking at this area, and I'm showing the kids, and I'm like, look at this devastation. It's so sad. I go, when you guys come up next time in your future, it's not going to even look like this anymore. It's always changing. This is an area that's always changing. And now to think that only 8 months ago, now it's even different again. It just keeps reinventing.
We got to take a quick break. More Big Sur stories when we come back, or whatever you want to discuss here on Garden America. So a quick break on Facebook Live, a bit longer. Back after these messages. Garden America after these messages, I should say, on Biz Talk Radio. Stay with us. And just like that on Facebook, we are back. Biz Talk Radio. Thank you for tuning into this pre-recorded show from last week. Again, you can always go to our Facebook page if you want to watch the show live. Garden America Radio Show. We also have an up-and-coming YouTube channel, which I see is gaining more and more subscribers, more likes every week. You can go to our YouTube channel, which is also Garden America Radio. And this show, again, as I mentioned every week, should be posted right around early afternoon. You can watch it back, the entire show, and many other shows on Facebook Live and, of course, on our YouTube channel.
I've never been to the Appalachia region, but I imagine Big Sur, that's what I envision. When you see campgrounds embedded in a forest and all you can see is trees for miles
Forever.
and miles and miles. Right. When I was up there, I was just amazing driving through there and then being in there with those trees. So really neat area.
I have a Big Sur story from years ago. We were driving up to San Francisco, so I always take the coast route through Big Sur.
Nice.
We're not in a hurry.
Yeah.
So we get up there, we're right in Big Sur, and it's very 2-lane road.
Yep.
So it's very, very narrow. And apparently there was a mountain slide.
Okay.
Came right down, blocking the road.
Oh, yeah. Happens often.
Well, guess what, people? You got to turn around. Turn around, which means you got to go all the way back.
You got to go all the way back.
South.
Yeah.
If you want to get on the 5 heading north to find that entrance, and it was another probably hour out of the way to go back because you couldn't go.
Yeah,
that was
they have
it.
that one road through it. Yep.
There's no other way around it.
Yeah.
So, but a beautiful drive. If you've ever taken that drive, you know what I'm talking about. If not, it is worth it.
Yeah.
If you have some time, you don't need to be on a freeway.
Yeah. Really, really neat area.
Beautiful area.
Have you been up there, John?
Yes, and I took that drive once. That was enough.
That was enough.
Now you would maybe remember this because John's only done the drive once. There, you come around a corner up there, and there's a restaurant and a like a bookstore or a library.
It's right past Lime Kiln State Park, and it's right there on the cliff.
And there was a famous author.
Well, that restaurant is not in the same spot. I can't remember the author's name off the top of my head. I'll find it. But yeah, it was his house.
It's not Arthur Miller.
No, it was his house.
Yeah.
And
John Steinbeck was in Monterey.
It was basically
can't think of the guy's
his
name.
house where he was kind of a nerd,
and he loved the
eccentric
area.
guy,
and he would write, right?
And so people would just come up here, and people would leave books behind, and then they would, it turned into a library, and we were there.
The restaurant's still there, right?
Henry Miller.
Thank you.
And I actually have a video. It's a really neat place. It's embedded in the woods,
right?
And they got artsy stuff all around. People just come up and do whatever they want.
It's become a tourist attraction.
Now. It's just one of these places. Some people just opt and live there for a while, right? And I have a video of Tasia in the middle of this area, this forest, beautiful trees, out in the open.
And this is years ago?
No, this was this past summer when we were there.
Okay.
People are just wandering around, looking at the books, looking at the artwork, and Tasia's just playing the piano in the middle of everyone. And people are just like, looking around.
Is she pretty good? I mean,
yeah, she's good.
She can carry a tune now?
Yeah, and so it's just kind of neat to have that as the backdrop.
That moment. She's playing the piano as a backdrop for these people.
Random people just, walking around and looking at the book. So, yeah, the Henry Miller Memorial Library is on the way.
Henry Miller, I've got to remember that.
And there are little things like that along the way. There's this monk. I don't know what do you call them? Where the monks? The monastery? Monastery, right? There also, and they have a trail mix that's really well known, like a granola, that kind of thing. And so just fun stuff. It's a fun drive. Yeah.
I love the drive. Beautiful.
Yeah.
I remember one time because it would take us. I would drive with my son, so it would take us, a couple days. We would take our time. So the one time I said to Eric, he's about 8 or 9. I said, we're not going to go that way. We need to get up to San Francisco quickly. so we're going to take the freeway all the way up there. Okay, what's it to him, right? So we're on the freeway driving, and of course, 8 hours later or so, we arrive. He goes, "Where are we?" I go, "We're in San Francisco." Well, that was quick. I go, "Well, yeah, because we went straight through," because he was so used to driving up the Coast Highway, which is, I believe, 101, right?
The one.
The one, or whatever, through Big Sur, where you would drive slow. We got up there so quick, and he couldn't believe how fast we got up there. I said, "Well, yeah, we didn't stop and run a big freeway, with 8 lanes, so it cut off a lot of the time."
I didn't know that about Henry Miller.
Henry Miller.
Oh, no?
No,
Yeah.
so that was good to learn.
I
You know what
couldn't
he's famous for? What books he wrote? Two of your favorite books,
Are
Tropic of Cancer and Tropic of Capricorn.
and it's funny because my folks had those books when I was a kid.
You weren't allowed to look in them.
Well, no, they were in a drawer.
Oh.
And John, that is so interesting, and other things that I would find that I had no business, but those were the 2 books that I remember they had in their drawer.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah,
Now Jack Kerouac wrote a book called Big Sur.
Big Sur. Yeah,
Yep.
it's a great area. It's I think a lot of people that travel from other areas of the world to come to California, I think that's one of the stops.
A lot of manzanitas up there, right?
Beautiful ones too,
Yeah.
right? Just
They
along
do
the
really well
coast.
in that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's just amazing because it's one of those rare areas in California where the forest does go to the ocean. Usually, we have these beaches. And,
It goes right to the ocean.
Yeah, it goes right to the ocean. So it's sad to hear, but I understand that they have that fire under control, and they're making good headway on that. But
She
always
mentioned
changing.
Joe mentioned this morning too how well things come back after fires.
Yeah.
That it thrives, and I guess we've all known that to be true after a forest fire. With the regrowth, and I think John, you explained this at one time. The fire, what it does to the soil, or why we have such good growth when it
Well, some
after a fire?
plants have adapted to fire areas, and their seeds won't germinate until after a fire. So, and that they used for Matilaha poppies for years.
in the heat, right?
We could never grow them, figure out how to grow them in California because you couldn't germinate the seeds.
Yeah.
And people would put out seed flats and then build a fire on top of them.
That's how they would get into Germany.
But now it turns out that it's not really the heat, but the something in the smoke.
Right.
Oh.
Was it the urea or something? I can't remember what it was, but
I don't know, but you can buy smoke now.
Yeah.
In a package, and you can.
Well, I
germinate
saw
your
a bunch
seeds
of
that
people.
way.
I saw a bunch of people
Yeah, yeah,
east
you
of San
do.
Diego with these.
They were
bags.
germinating seeds.
They were collecting smoke in these bags, and then
But
You gotta
know
be
what?
careful; it gets in your eyes.
But one of the things, and Joe was kind of hinting at it, and it's just for people that don't live in fire-prone areas, one of the most amazing things that happens is the sequence after a fire, and it is a true natural sequence because it'll be a forested area, and you won't even have these plants like you're mentioning. There won't even be a Matilaha in the area any longer because the forest has taken it over. But then after a
Too
fire,
much shade, right?
yeah. But then after a fire, there's a sequence, and that sequence is what ensures the forest because those first initial plants that happen after a fire then get the soil ready, get the area ready for the next level of plants, and then the trees come up, and then again, then it's shaded, and
It's
now
like
those
an-
plants don't exist anymore.
it's like a new generation.
Yeah.
The fire burns off, and then there's this regrowth and new generation. Like you said, different steps.
Have you ever been to what they call like the old growth forests? There's really nothing here in California because we have way too many fires.
That
But
have
like
not-
up
the
in
areas
Canada,
that haven't experienced fires.
like up in Canada, they have old growth forests where these forests have been there not just for hundreds of years, but
Thousands.
thousands of years. Have you ever been into an area like that?
No.
No?
If I did, I didn't know it
Yeah,
when I was younger.
it's just astonishing
How
to
different it
see
looks.
the difference. I thought I was in an old forest when you're going through the redwoods and you're going
Right.
through all these areas and you're like, oh, that tree's 700 years old or whatever, and you're like, oh wow, and then you're like go through an old growth forest where that tree is like you're saying like 1,000 years old. You're like, oh my gosh.
Well, you notice that in Europe and in England, we saw a few trees like that. That
On properties.
on properties that the tree was planted 1,000 years ago, where and these are in residential areas. You can see a sycamore, and that'd be the biggest sycamore you've ever seen in your life. because it's it's planted 500 years ago.
Right, right.
Where no one was planting in residential areas in the U.S. 500 years ago.
Yeah, it's pretty intense. Pretty intense.
So we've got just a minute or so here for this segment, then one more segment. Again,
John,
reaching out to Facebook Live if you have any questions or comments.
we have 1 minute before break.
We have a little less, but
Okay. Well, after the break, I was going to say John should tell us what he's going to be doing next week. It sounds exciting.
oh yeah, that's right. We should mention we are going to be off next week. Just real quick.
Okay.
We're going to be dark next week, just for 1 week. Don't panic.
But we're not going to tell you why till after the break.
Till after the break, because I know we took some time off over the holidays. So we're going to explain why after we take this break on Facebook Live and Biz Talk Radio here on Garden America. Stay with us. Okay, we made it. This is our final segment. It's been a quick show so far. At least it seems like it, because a lot of great information with Joe, and the speed of the show today and the energy was something that we really, really like. So thank you for being with us. Thank you for listening on Biz Talk Radio. Thank you for watching us on Facebook Live. Now, before the break, we did mention we are off next week just for 1 quick week, and John's going to explain where he's going and why we're taking the day off.
And I believe the auction's open to everyone, but the Pacific Rose Society is having its annual auction at the L.A. Arboretum.
The L.A. Arboretum. If you're up in that area, right?
Yeah,
Drop
and
by.
if you want to know what roses are being offered, you can go to the Pacific Rose Society website, and I believe there'll be a link with pictures to everything that's going to be in the auction. Their auction's kind of different because, when we have our auction here in San Diego, there's only one of each plant.
Right, yeah.
But at the Pacific auction, they may have 20 of one plant, and a lot of them will be bare root. Some are in containers like we sell down here, but a lot of them will be bare root. And I should explain the way the auction goes. Is say they had 20 bare root plants.
Okay.
They would go through and people would start bidding on a plant until the bidding stopped, and somebody would go, I bid $30. And then the auctioneer would go, okay, how many do you want for $30? And they'll go, just one. And he'd go, okay, I have 19 left. Does anybody want one for $29? Does anyone want one for... And he keeps going down.
They make sure they move the plants.
Until somebody buys it, yeah.
Well, that's an interesting way of doing it.
Now, sometimes people realize that and they're waiting
They just
for the
wait
price
for
to
somebody
go
to-
down.
Yeah.
But then
You run the risk
too many
of
people have been waiting, and even though the first one sold for 30, the second one may end up selling for 40. Because
That's
you've got
cool, yeah.
several people bidding. But it's fun. It's really fun. And
Interesting.
I believe there's a potluck there too, so you can have something to eat.
There you go. Always
And-
good stuff.
And if you just want to step into the auction, see what's going on, and then visit the L.A. Arboretum, where else can you see peacocks and bottle trees
In the same place.
in the same place?
Peacocks under bottle trees.
Yeah.
There you
Huge
go.
mature bottle trees.
And they have mature Australian grass trees that'll probably be in bloom this time of year.
The LA Arboretum is in what area of Los Angeles?
It's in Arcadia.
Not the city of industry.
No.
Just that name.
I know.
Where do you live? The city of industry.
Yeah.
Kind of smoky there, right?
Well,
Commerce is right
Commerce.
there with it.
Downey.
Names can be deceiving because Hawaiian Gardens up there sounds like a beautiful
Yeah,
place.
that's true.
Yeah, that's why they do that sometimes.
Yeah.
Isn't it true that Iceland and Greenland are exactly the opposite?
Yep.
That Greenland's really the icy,
Covered with
barren,
ice and
and Iceland's
snow
more green. And
Yep.
that was done on purpose, I think. Stay away.
Done on purpose. This is how we're going to get people never to come here.
They did do that on purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Did you know that, we mentioned this on air before, but did you know that Greenland was in North America?
Was in.
Was
Is in North America.
It's considered part of North America?
Yeah.
Oh,
I never heard
I
that.
never thought of that.
yeah, true.
If you look at the map, there it is.
If you look at the map, there it is.
It's just an island off of North America.
Rick asked if we had any special events planned for this year. You know, we just can't plan.
Yeah.
Things change so quickly.
We try to do something, and then things come.
Now,
and
we are
change,
talking
and-
about doing a remote
Yeah.
from your nursery in a couple of 2 or 3 weeks,
Yeah.
which will give people an opportunity to see us live on location
3
and
weeks.
showcase some of your plants.
And if things do go well at that remote, we are looking at other ones
Right.
that we can do.
This is kind of a test to make sure that
Yeah.
everything still works. Our remote equipment, our
Yeah.
mics, our board, our mixer boards, so on and
we
so
are
forth.
working.
Yeah, we are working diligently right now to make this happen.
Yeah.
I think
Good.
we're caught up on a lot of nice words
For
from people
Bruce.
for Bruce on Facebook
Yes.
Live. We do appreciate that. And that's the one good thing about Facebook. On this page, it will always be there.
Yep.
You can always scroll down, catch various shows, or if you missed something, you missed a comment, or even missed maybe some advice that somebody gave on Facebook too, you can always go back to our Facebook page. It's always Garden America Radio Show, whether it's our YouTube channel, which we do urge people to go to our YouTube channel, like and subscribe. We need to get our subscription rate up there, and we need a lot of likes. So hopefully you like us anyway.
Gina says that the Asakawas are some of the best people that she's ever had the pleasure of knowing. And a lot
Oh,
of people
yeah.
are agreeing with that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Fun to travel with, too.
They are.
Yeah.
Yeah, they are, and their kids are fun to travel with. Were you on the trip
I never traveled with them, the kids.
Okay, because her daughter,
Oh, wait a second.
Tasha, met us in France.
Yes. I'm sorry. Yes.
Yeah, you
I
were
was there
there.
when she met us in France. Yes.
Yeah. And I think we've mentioned this before too, Tiger, but of all the places at was it like a farmer's market in France where they had all those things?
It was in Armies or
Arles.
Arles.
In Arles, France.
Yeah.
There was, I mean, every kind of food you can imagine. And then walking along with all these people, and someone goes, "Hi, Brian."
Yeah, I'm in France. Okay, you got 7 billion people on the planet.
France.
And hey,
Random.
Brian. Well, it turns out to be a girl that I went to high school with.
Wow.
And the fact that she still recognized me,
Yeah.
that's always a good thing.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And
Oh,
her name was Terry. I went, Terry, my gosh, what are you doing? And they were taking a river cruise.
Okay.
That-
I was gonna say, was she vacationing?
Yeah,
Did she
one of the
live down
stops. It was a stop in Arles
there? Okay.
River, whatever it was in that area.
I never remember if it's Arles or Arles.
One of those.
Because, you know, the French don't always pronounce all their
but
letters.
Yeah,
the fact that
just
John
admit 'em
remembered
as they want.
that was very cool. It's like, wow. What
That's
are the
funny.
odds? What are the odds?
Yeah, that's very true. Like you just said, all the people in the world.
All right, 7 billion people, and that happened. So that's
Well,
going
you
to do
showed
it.
me a magazine cover of that
You?
was of you in England, an English magazine cover.
Yeah, my brother called me one day. He was working in England at an advertising agency. This is back in the 90s. He says, hey, you're on the cover of a magazine over here. It's an engineering production radio type magazine. I go, what are you talking about? And he sent it to me. And sure enough, I'm in a studio, posing, pointing to somebody like, okay, go ahead and talk. One of those things. Weird. All right. Hey, that's going to do it for this show. Thank you for listening to our stories. Thank you for all the nice comments about Bruce and Sharon and their family. We do appreciate it. We are off again next week, just for 1 week. So watch an old show. Go to our YouTube channel. Go to our Facebook page. Watch one of our old shows. We're going to be on remote in a couple of weeks and back week after next, right here on Garden America. In the meantime, take care, be safe, and we'll see you in 2 weeks right here on Garden America.
Do you see what
Yeah.